Thank you, Chiara. I'm very humbled to follow after your presentation. Thank you. So in your body, as we speak, there's a mortal battle between the sleeping systems and the waking system. If you feel you need to take a siesta, now feel free to proceed. Eminence, excellence, fellow academicians, I'm so delighted to offer you some reflections. Students with disabilities, complex learners, are not from the other side of the moon. They partake in the joy of learning, discovery, and reflection on themselves, on those around them, and the world. The disparate ability, gifts, and unique challenges must be understood and incorporating into all global education endeavors. The education of children with disabilities is not a separate agenda, but a central part of the overreaching goal to educate the whole child for the whole world, reclaiming the shared principles of love, reciprocity, solidarity, and inclusion. The mission of education is to cultivate flourishing, engaged children. In the Platonic tradition, education endeavors to nurture that which is true, logic and science, that which is ethical and just, goodness, and that which is beautiful, aesthetics. In the face of the challenges of today, war and terror, a planetary climate crisis, global pandemics, and growing inequalities, creating a more inclusive and sustainable world is education's urgent challenge. In the words of Pope Francis, quote, a summons to solidarity with the next generation, with each other, and with our ever more fragile planet is the ethical imperative of our times. Including neuroatypical children and children with disabilities, which I prefer to call complex learners, is not an addendum, but a central aspect of addressing the challenge of educating the next generation and fostering their eudaimonic development. The mission to educate children is built on an imperative, profoundly human, to extend solidarity, support, and learning opportunity to every member of our society, especially those facing additional barriers to accessing opportunities to learn. We are in Italy, and I would fail if I didn't channel what I still think is the best definition of education by the great Italian pedagogista of Reggio Emilia, Loris Malaguzzi, who said, education should be a nostalgia for the future, not for the past, for the future, where we imagine a better world where we're going to meet our children, a nostalgia for the future. In the paper I prepared for this lecture, I delved into the state of education for children around the world today, and then evaluate the very wicked impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on children and youth in terms of education. Finally, I developed a framework for the practices for engaging children with disabilities, with a focus on neuroatypical children and complex learners. The Education Global Compact that the Holy Father summoned us to respond to. Basic primary education, public education in schools is a normative ideal the world over. It's an idea, I should note, that first formed in the neural pathways of a politician in the city of Boston. It was Horace Mann who imagined the idea that all children should have compulsory, non-denominational, free education. This idea spread around the world. It's the light principle. Where there is light, there will be growth. This is now a moment to share the good news. Enrollment of children in primary education is nearly universal. The gender gap has narrowed, and in some regions of the world, girls tend to perform better in schools than boys. And this is a very profound point that was first announced, of all people, by Charles Darwin. He is mapping the coast of he's in the HMS Beagle, mapping the coast of South America, and he famously, in a moment of feverish creativity, is writing what in the notebooks, what will become the origin of the species, writes in the margin, educate girls, multiplication 2, twice the impact. It's a brilliant insight. Then our economists at the World Bank did all the empirical work, some subtle, some vulgar, to show how investing in the education of girls is the greatest achievement for development. So we need to note the good news of education. While a lot remains to be done, education remains widely viewed as the camino real for sustainable development, and fundamentally, and this I think is the point that Darwin was imagining, although he couldn't fully articulate it, it's a driver of wellness. Literacy is the path by which we enter the so-called bureaucratic registry, which has enormous implications for the mothers and fathers and their children. And managing, Chiara, these monumental institutions that are so difficult to manage. And you beautifully share with us your journey. There is enormous evidence now that literacy generates the most powerful virtuous cycle. Education, our researchers at UNESCO say, quote, is the child's strongest barrier against poverty, especially for girls. Educated girls are likely to marry later, have healthier children, they're more productive at home, and better paid in the workplace, better able to protect themselves, and more able to participate in decision-making at all levels. Additionally, this, that is the education of girls, furthers the sustainable development goals of universal primary education and gender equality. End of quote. The values and virtues flowing from a quality education have been named and memorialized in multiple covenants and declarations by some of the world's most august bodies. The worthy ideals embodied in Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights The right to universal, free, compulsory education come to mind. Education shall be directed, the article reads, to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedom. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial and religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. End of quote. Progress in children's education and the participation of school is laudable, but there are enormous challenges. The work ahead is significant. Millions of children remain out of school, and illiteracy, remember, illiteracy is the camino real, it's the royal path to health and the full eudaimonic development, is rampant. Approximately 800 million adults over the age of 15 today are illiterate, and women, and remember what Darwin reminded us, educate girls. Women make well over half of those who are illiterate around the world. While progress has been made, there has been a geologic shock called COVID-19. Millions of children and youth experience COVID damage and dislocations that will mark their developmental pathways for years to come. COVID can be described as a long-lasting catastrophic shock, removing children from the prescribed pathways that enable them the world over to reach and master maturationally, culturally determined milestones in the maturational, socio-emotional, cognitive, and moral domains. Millions of youth are mourning and facing the losses that flow from COVID that are at once immediate and ambiguous. For millions of children, the pandemic represents a long-lasting, catastrophic education emergency, robbing them of so many rituals with what going to school entails: learning, opportunities, socializing with other children, seeking the support from teachers, physical education, accessing healthcare, nutrition, and the various other scaffolds that are needed developmentally for appropriate socio-emotional, cognitive, and metacognitive growth. The data suggests, most alarmingly, that COVID-19 has wiped out 20 years of gain, as 100 million more children now fail basic reading skills because of COVID-19. Two-thirds of those children are in Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition, school closures disrupted immunization and other health services that will have an echoes effect over time. Research also has found that neuroatypical complex learners experience significant extra adversity in COVID-related health, mental health, socio-emotional, and physical outcomes in an entire range of domains, including less sleep, poorer diets, less exercise, more use of electronic media, and increased symptoms of child neurodevelopmental disability and the attending comorbidity. As the world of education endeavors to move into a phase of recovery, the most vulnerable children, including complex learners and children with disabilities, face very significant loss. Since the outbreak over 3 years ago, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted education systems globally, affecting the most vulnerable learners the hardest. Integrating complex learners and students with disability into educational system requires a multifaceted approach that needs to focus on a variety of domains. First, accessibility to opportunities to learn and tailor learning strategies, supportive technologies when available, and data-informed continuous improvement. It involves reimagining and re-engineering educational environments and pedagogies to accommodate the diverse needs and abilities, ensuring that every child can engage, can be. Who told us it's not do, it's be? That was the most profound lesson, I think, of our encounter. And therefore, they can benefit from the opportunities. An approach that is grounded in Pope Francis' summon to solidarity in the Global Compact understands that education is a fundamental human right and a key to unlocking the potential of every individual, contributing to their ability to lead lives, purpose, lives, love, lives of meaning. Educational institutions, educations, and policy makers must commit to continuously elaborate, engineer, try, experiment with inclusive educational practice. This requires investing, when possible, in teacher training on what it means to educate and engage a complex learner, a neuroatypical child. My son, 35 years old now, was diagnosed at age 5 with severe dyslexia, off the chart. The brilliant young doctors and one of the iconic hospitals in the world, Massachusetts General Hospital, told my wife, who is a psychologist and a professor at Harvard, think that your son is blind. He will never learn to read. This is bad bedside manner. Chiara, you know all about this. He's now the numero dos in IT at NYU. So there are ways to thrive that we all understand. But here, I think that what Chiara just shared with us is so beautiful and so powerful. Here is the organic, the authentic engagement of families, of communities, of organizations that tell the educators what is working, what is not working, what needs to be included to foster the development, the learning of complex learners. Educating children with learning differences, such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, children on the spectrum, and students with autism, students with physical disabilities, represents a vital aspect of developing an inclusive educational landscape. The commitment to inclusion demands an approach that is evolving, that is dynamic, and where the systems of feedback need to be always caliber and recalibrate. I think it's very important to understand that the empirical research has noted that inclusive practices benefit all children. The study to end all studies by the National Research Council concludes, quote, inclusive classrooms teach all students about the importance of acceptance. Evidence also indicates that, I'm quoting, evidence also indicates that students with and without disabilities who are educated in inclusive classrooms have better academic outcomes than students who are educated in non-inclusive classrooms. So this is a point of entry into imagining what are the issues. And I believe deeply, intuitively, that there is an ethical, let's call it sensibility, that children in inclusive classrooms get nurtured on, that is so basic as these socio-emotional domains continue to have ever greater relevance to operate in, let's call them, what the economist, Stefan is going to correct me, I think it's called soft skills needed in today's economy. In the written paper, I reviewed the scholarly literature and suggest a range of interventions for addressing the needs of students with physical disabilities, the needs of students with autism, spectrum disorder, ASD, addressing the needs of the children with the various dyslexia, dyscalculia, and the like. But this is not an exhaustive approach, but rather a point of entry into how best practices can be deployed, adapted to desperate national and cultural settings. To conclude, then, the plea for inclusive education is the heart of any project moving forward to fundamentally reorient education to its origins, that is, the eudaimonic flourishing of children. It's not just a novel idea or practice, it works in terms of the academic outcomes of children. You know, they do all kinds of fancy studies with math. Is inclusion better for learning math? Is better for reading? And the data seems to suggest that indeed children in inclusive classrooms tend to do better in, let's call them, the spectrum of cognitive and metacognitive skills. And I think that's the fundamental message, because I think it is addressing the metacognitive, that uniquely human capacity to reflect on our own learning, that is differentially flourishing in children who are growing up in schools that are inclusive. So this is essential, I think, as we embark on the project of engineering a world out of the fragility that unchecked climate change is now reminding us. Our world is ever more miniaturized, it's ever more interconnected, it's ever more fragile. So thank you for your attention. Thank you, Chiara, again, because I think also you went to the heart of a fundamental issue, and that's the issue of love in teaching and in learning. You know, there's a fantastic book on the people that were the partners of one of the great dyslexics in the world, Albert Einstein. So when Einstein comes to the US as a refugee, the Institute for Advanced Study, everybody's watching this movie, it's not so good, Oppenheimer, Father, you know. But it's amazing because who do you bring to entertain Einstein? He needed playmates. You know, they put the sandbox in Princeton and he needed playmates. So they bring the very eminent physicists. And there's a beautiful book. There are 4 or 5. It's von Neumann, it's Teller, a very nasty person. Anyway, there's a whole group of brilliant physicists that come to the Institute for Advanced Study to be in the Playboy with Einstein. And what's fantastic is 5 of them went to the same gymnasium in Budapest. So there is this amazing book that they all went to the same gymnasium and they all had the same mathematics teacher. The book is called The 10 Jews Who Escaped Hitler and Changed the World. So 5 of them went to the same gymnasium and had the same mathematics. And the lesson from that is that in a good school, the teachers love the children. In a great school, the children love the teachers, and the children are rooting for the teacher. And this is so clear in the voices of these very brilliant mathematicians and physicists. It was their love of the teacher that I think best explained their connection with the field of mathematics and physics. So love is a piece in teaching and learning. Play is a piece in teaching and learning. The ludic ways of engaging with the world are so fundamental. And we're missing all of this in education. We did a study, it was in the front page of a lot of newspapers around the world. We asked children, fill in the sentence, school is. What do you think the dominant answer is? Boring. And I asked Rita Susmuth in Germany, and she told me this would be the answer in Germany. And I asked the Minister of Education in Brazil, and the boring. And I asked the Pierre Léna, the former French Prime Minister, or the Minister of Education, Jacques Lang, and he say boring in a beautiful French accent. So play, ludic, in the age of boredom in schools. Thank you so much for your patience.